Historically, we are the debris, forgotten faces, never more to be. Instead of legends fighting for something that had no guarantees, living ghosts we chose to live and die as their worker bees. Why didn't we break out from their hide? Why didn't we follow our own sun to another life? Why didn't we scroll over all their flowers? Brothers and sisters, it's okay to be free. Brothers and sisters, it's time to be freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom to choose, freedom to talk, freedom of religion and association, freedom of the press, freedom to be you, freedom to be you, freedom to be me. I can feel your secret vibrations like our last fading song. It's time, oh, it's time to be free. I can hear your vibrations like a final human cry. Oh, it's time, oh, it is time to be way past time to be free.
Big show tonight, Doc.
Sure is. I love that intro. It's time
Thanks,
to be
man.
free.
Well, we've got two guests waiting in the green room or whatever we call the little square below us. So I'm just going to get them in. First off, is hoping she can hear us. Is Rosie Marshall?
I
the
can't hear
relentless
you.
Rosie Marshall.
Done it again.
Okay, I'll cut you out and come back in. Hope for the best.
I'll go back again. Okay.
And John Ruddick. And all we have is a grey screen. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear
We
you.
can hear
The
you.
Honourable John
Well,
Ruddick.
that's
I can
good.
hear
Well,
you. We just
that's
can't
something.
see you.
Okay. Now, I wonder
Have you
why
got?
that.
It looks like the camera's facing the other way. Have you got the camera facing you?
Oh, yes.
I can hear
How's
you
that?
now.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Don't
okay,
touch anything.
We can hear you, Rosie.
Here we
I can
go.
hear you this time.
Is that working? No, it's not. Okay. I apologise.
That's all right. This is
yeah,
Cafe
we'll
Life
check
People
that
World
out.
History. This is the perils of going live. What I might do, John, is kick you out and get you logged
Yes.
back in, and that might fix it up.
Yes. That would be good.
Okay, see ya. Happy Easter to everybody.
And
out
now I
there.
can't hear you again. I can't hear you again.
One more time. Sorry, Rosie. Okay. Happy Easter to everyone. I'm doing this on behalf of the King because he forgot, because he's too busy. He's too busy at a mosque somewhere, I think. And so happy Easter to all of you that believe in the Jesus, and I'm one of them. So happy Easter for that. I'll just bring in. Here he is. Can you hear us,
There
John?
he is.
I can hear you. I can see you. I can't see
Fantastic.
Rosie.
We're going to bring her in now. Hopefully she can hear us. Can you hear us, Rosie?
Yes, I can hear everyone.
Yay.
That's great.
Magic.
So I'm going to move you all up.
Magic.
We got started. This might be an Easter thing. So thank you both for joining us. And John, we invited you in because Rosie said she met you at was it a church, Rosie?
No, we met at the Good Nights, Natalie Doomer's Good Nights at the Golden Sheaf on Wednesday night. But we've met before, John, haven't we?
Yes.
I've been a fan of yours for a while. Someone who speaks the
Me
same.
too, man.
Very mutual. Very mutual.
I have to say, it's actually great. I actually love saying honourable with you because you're one of the few politicians that actually earns the word honourable. I'm sorry, you are.
Well, thank you, Mark.
It's the rest of us.
Not sorry, he's honourable. I'm glad
The
there's
rest
someone.
of us plebs down here looking up just in disbelief at our politicians. It's so yeah. Can I ask you before we start, how do you keep not only your motivation up but your spirits up when you're often dealing with what appears to a lot of people to be just madness?
Well, look, I will say that the culture in the New South Wales Upper House, where there are lots of, there's obviously the government and the opposition, Labor and Liberal, but there's also a lot of minor party voices. Yeah, there's us, there's legalised cannabis, there's animal justice, there's a few Greens, there's some X1 Nation, there's all sorts of type of people in there. So there is actually quite a collegial culture. So people sort of think politics is mainly about sort of bashing each other up, but there are, the upper house is full of ideologues. Okay, so even if they're in Labor or Liberal, rather than representing a lower house seat where they're basically a glorified mayor, these are people who sort of are true believers. Now, yes, look, it really is, you feel like, one little example is, okay, there was about 50 cops in New South Wales that lost their job because they didn't take the COVID vax, okay? Now, most of them have moved on and don't want to go back to the cops, but a couple of dozen do very, very much. And as soon as I got there, in my maiden speech, I said, well, look, we've got to get these COVID cops back in the job, the ones that want their job back, because, no one else has taken their night COVID vaccine by now. Everyone's sort of not listening to the official guidelines anymore. And I was just and I thought, well, look, it's a Labor government, it's in power, and it was a Liberal government that sacked the cops. So I thought, well, Labor's, COVID had sort of, passed by then. So I thought, well, what's the harm in giving these cops back their job because they were proven right about not taking the stupid COVID vax? But no, just absolutely stonewall. That's sort of, they just sort of, there are some subjects which are just taboo. I think they are getting worn down on the global warming because I think the global warming stuff is getting so hard to defend. Yeah. And so, it was snowing here. It was snowing a week ago in New South Wales, and it had only been summer less than 4 weeks earlier. Okay, so where's the global warming, Al Gore? I think they are and I think lefties all around the world are starting to sort of think, gee, maybe the world's not coming to an end because of climate change.
Yeah, it especially helps when Bill Gates comes out and says he doesn't believe in it anymore. That sort of thing.
Yes.
But when you say that, any idea why Labor won't back down? Is it are they scared of the legal repercussions from other people who lost their jobs?
Well, look, on the COVID cops, we have just recently, I had been banging my head against the wall, but we had budget estimates recently, about sort of a month ago, with the police minister, but also flanked by all the top cops, including the new police commissioner, who I'd heard good reports about, that he was, not a DEI appointment. He was a pretty good old time fashioned copper. Anyway, so I asked him at budget estimates, have you thought about reinstating these cops? And he said, waffle. But then I said to him, right, I said, Commissioner, would you be prepared to meet with some of these ex-police and their families who lost their job over the COVID jab? Now, he said, yes, I'd be prepared to meet with them. And this was on the public record. So I think that we are actually Rosie was there the other night. I think that there's going to be some movement on that front. That's what I think is going to happen, but we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks.
One more question, because this is what I advertised it about, and this is what Rosie brought up too. So you're trying to put a bill forward to end no jab, no play, and at the moment there's a huge amount of people who aren't getting their children vaccinated.
Yes.
Why are you doing it, and what are your chances, you think, of getting it through?
Okay. Well, look, I'm doing it. Let's deal with why I'm doing it. Well, there would be two reasons. So firstly, I am a fairly radical libertarian. I'm very, very distrustful of the government. And I do not believe, and I'm a big supporter of voluntary choice, maximising voluntary choice in as many fields as possible. So therefore, I'm against it from libertarian principles, where we shouldn't say, no money for you, no benefits for you unless you get, 75,000 jabs for your children before the age of 3.5. Okay, so that's one reason why I'm against it. But the other reason against it is that in the post-COVID era, like a lot of other people, I am personally highly distrustful of pharmaceutical companies and government regulators, okay, when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Okay, so I'd never thought about vaccines before, before COVID. But I'll tell you how I early on jumped on when COVID, erupted, how I just immediately started saying, there's no way on God's earth I'm going to take this vax. I'll tell you how I got at that position. And pretty much I live on the North Shore of Sydney. This is teal country, okay? Most people go to private schools around here, and pretty much everybody signed up for the vax. They not only signed up for it around here, they'd get their vax and then they'd put it on social media and Facebook and say, look, I just did it. I'm out here to save your grandma. That's how much they love the vax around here.
Yeah, they used to say, I just took the vax, you're welcome.
That's right.
Used to be around their Facebook page.
Yes. Now, I'll tell you, I had an unusual experience in 1998. What had happened was in 1996, so about 30 years ago this last month, John Howard won. And I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young Liberal, very enthusiastic about the Liberal Party. We're all really happy that John Howard's won. I get a job, I'm 26 years old, I get a job with Ross Cameron, who's the new member for Parramatta. And I was an enthusiastic political staffer. Now, what happened was, in the electorate of Parramatta was the Australian, it might have even been Southeast Asia headquarters for a little company you might have heard of, Pfizer. And they were a huge employer. And this was they had like a bit of a manufacturing plant there, but it was like their big corporate office. And so as soon as Ross gets elected, we get a knock on the door. Yeah, there's three very, very, very well-dressed Pfizer executives. Oh, Ross, congratulations. Yeah, we want to be your friend. Okay, great. Let's be friends. And they sort of said, look, Ross, if you ever have a fundraiser on, you might have Alexander Downer come down or Peter Costello come into Parramatta to give a speech, we'll take out a table. We'll pay top dollar. We want to be your friend. And so they were our friends for a couple of years. And I was sort of delegated in the office to sort of manage the relationship with these guys. Now, then after 2 years, of them taking us to nice dinners, getting along well, having beers. Then after 2 years, they said, John, would you like to work for Pfizer? And they were going to basically double my salary. And I thought, well, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And I was, still had very good relations with Ross Cameron. He's the president of the Libertarian Party. But Ross said, well, this is at the time, Pfizer was the 5th biggest company on earth. Okay, wow. In the top 10, half of them were pharmaceutical companies. Now they've been replaced by tech companies now. And Rosemary the other day was reminding me that I'm a massive fan of Ronald Reagan. But Ronald Reagan made a really big, massive mistake. Everyone's imperfect. Ronald Reagan in 1986, maybe 1985, he basically said, pharmaceutical companies can't get sued. Okay, I mean, it's not as simple as that. not as simple as that, but it's basically said, do what you want. You're trying to help people. Well, we'll have a little bit of oversight of it, but basically you can't be wiped out by selling a bad vaccine. So then what happens is the pharmaceutical industry's just got the handbrake off. Bang.
Ching.
And so when they offered me a job, now they offered me a job in government relations. They would just, they just gear. I think they got about 25 people in government relations now. I think I was about the second or third person they employed. Now, I was a country boy, okay? I had worked on a farm on the outback for 2 years, and then I'd gone to university, then I was working for Ross, which I loved working at. Then I find myself working for a corporation with, one of the biggest companies on earth, okay? That was a total culture shock to me. On my first day, I said, okay, well, what do I do? It's grad title, government relations advisor. They said, okay, John, here's a gold Amex. I said, cool, what do I do with that? They said, okay, well, your job, John, is to go out to as many breakfasts, lunches and dinners, fundraisers, with politicians, regulators, and journalists. And, just the more you can go and sort of, be well presented and polite and respectful and interesting and sort of fly the Pfizer flag, that's your job. I thought, well, that's a pretty good job. I said, yeah. The more money you spend at restaurants and so forth, the better. I said, cool, okay. Now, and then I said to them, okay, well, I don't know much about pharmaceuticals. I studied humanities, not science at university. What do I do? And they said, okay, well, what you do is, I said, what do I say to them? When I'm talking to them for, an hour and a half over lunch, what do I talk to these people about? They said, okay, basically you just want to sort of make them have a favorable view of Pfizer. And you want to say to them, look, poor old Pfizer, every time its noble scientists in the lab come up with 40 concept vaccines, 40 potential vaccines, for every 40, only one will ever get to market. So we've got to waste all this money on R&D, all these billions of dollars, for 39 are going to be discarded. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. Why are they discarded? They said, oh, unintended side effects. I said, okay, good. Well, I'm glad you're checking for them. Okay, then they said, and the other thing is you say it takes 10 to 15 years to go from the concept stage in the lab until it gets to market. I said, well, that's a lot of time. They said, yeah. I said, well, why so long? Same answer. Unintended side effects. So they were basically saying, look, the government's got to be nice to our industry because we put billions into R&D and often it goes nowhere. Now, occasionally, and they might look at us when we make billions and hundreds of billions out of a new drug like Viagra or whatever, we lose a lot of money. I said, okay, cool. Okay. So that was 1999. Now, just to finish off that Pfizer story, they sacked me after 5 months because I was absolutely ill-suited to being a corporate person, and also my heart wasn't. Look, I've always sort of tried to believe in sort of natural health. Okay, I'm not perfect, but I've always believed in trying to eat fresh food and Mother Nature, is the best solution. That had been my inclination without thinking about it. Anyway, so that was 1999. Fast forward to 2000, and I saw really early on, well, this is potentially a bad flu that's killing old, very, very elderly people more than a normal winter flu would, but the rest of us should just basically get on with life. And I was publicly saying that in March 2020. And then then we get to about July 2020, lockdowns, complete psychodrama all around the world over nothing. And then I start hearing, they're working on a warp speed vaccine. And I'm already highly skeptical of all the COVID BS. And then they said, there was 4 or 5 companies working on the COVID vaccine, and it's called the warp speed vaccine. Gee, sounds great, doesn't it? Warp speed vaccine. After Pfizer told me inside the tent, don't take one after we've been testing it for 10 to 15 years. Don't take it. It could be dangerous. Now they're working on a warp speed vaccine. And there was 4 or 5 companies that said, yep, Mr. President, we're going to, for the good of the country, for the good of the world, we're going to work on the warp speed vaccine. Now it was Pfizer, AstraZeneca, and others. But you know what they all said at the beginning? They're not going to make a profit out of it. That's what they all said at the beginning. They all said they're not going to make a profit out of it. Okay, they were doing it out of the love of humanity. It was such a crisis. Okay, and then they all dropped that. But when they said at the beginning, we're not going to make a profit out of it, we're going to do it at cost. Everyone said, "Oh, thank you so much, Fab. You're so kind." And the media couldn't stop talking. Look how benevolent this industry is. But then when they dropped it, just made no news. Of course, why'd their share price go up so much? Well, because they made a massive profit out of it. Now the share prices are goddamn now, of course, but anyway. So then I was involved with all the anti-lockdown protests and everything else. And during those marches, I would meet people who I'd be marching with them, and they'd say, John, I've never taken one vaccine in my life. I've never met these people before. I'd heard these anti-vaxxers were really crazy people, okay, really sort of, wackos who, disheveled hippies that live, in the back blocks of Murwillumbah. Well, when I met these people with my own eyes, they all had one thing in common: really, really healthy. But regardless, sometimes I met them when they were 70, sometimes I met when they were 17, and they were really healthy. Now, is that because they've never taken a vaccine in their life? Might be. It might also just be they've just been health-focused people, but we should have some curiosity. Maybe it is because they're not taking the vaccine. And this is what I've noticed after being in the Parliament for 3 years, is that there's zero curiosity amongst the government health authorities about this small little group of people who've never taken a vax. Now, that's a magnificent case study. Now, let's put COVID aside, but I think that before COVID, I'm guessing about 0.5% of people in New South Wales, for whatever reason, had never taken one vaccine in their life, about 0.5%. People on the show might know better than I do, but I think that's roughly accurate. Well, that's 40, 50,000 people. Okay, well, why doesn't the Department of Health have some curiosity, or the Minister for Health saying, okay, well, look, there's some people who haven't taken a vaccine for 30 years. Let's get them in. Let's do their blood samples. What's their health records like? Are they dying of cancer? Are they getting allergies as much as other people? Are they getting the flu as much as other people?
How are you, Rosemary? Can you hear me? All right. Well, we'll just wait for John to come back. I don't know what happened there, but that was fascinating.
I can hear John.
I can hear John.
I can't hear John. Oh, yeah, I can't hear him. Keep going.
Got me now, Michael? Michael.
No,
okay, Rosie and Paul can hear me.
I can hear you, yep.
Can you hear me, Michael? I was in the middle of this really great rant.
It was a great rant. It was a great rant. You were talking about that, the lack of curiosity.
Yes.
Of unvaccinated, and there have been studies. There's Dr. Paul Thomas in the US. He published a cohort of unvaccinated children in his practice, and there was significant difference between the unvaccinated and the vaccinated children. And of course, we've got the inconvenient study. The vaccinated children had a cognitive ADHD, autism, atopy, asthma, seizures, basically a whole range of chronic illness. And I have published a chart from the paper. Now, so Paul Thomas and James Lyons Wheeler published the paper. This is just the data from his own practice. And within days, it got pulled off the journal, and he lost his ability to practice. And it's not because the data was wrong; it was because it was inconvenient. And now, of course, we've got the paper from the Ford Zervos, which shows the same thing. It shows the same thing, and there are actually multiple series now that show the same thing, that the unvaccinated children have much less chronic disease. So they really should. This is negligent that they're not looking at it, and this pattern of coercion, lawfare, and censorship is very real. And so it's a willful blindness, I would say, rather than a lack of.
Well, I think there's so many billions and billions sloshing around. It just creates an enormous amount of incentive to just keep the current arrangements in place and not question the vaccines. Now, you would think that the government department called the Department of Public Health would be thinking about how can we make the public healthier every day. But it's very clear. They are thinking, how can we sustain the vaccine industry without it being ever questioned? And the fact that they've got no curiosity absolutely makes in my opinion, makes the onus is on them to prove why it's not evil what they're doing. Okay, because they don't want scrutiny. They don't want to be challenged. So every other time in human history, when a group of people have done that and they're hiding behind government protection, they've been the baddies. So I think that's my starting position where we are at this point in time, that they're the baddies and they've got to prove, no, it's good. The good news is, since COVID, there's been a reasonably sharp reduction in the amount of people taking vaccines in general. But it's still high. But it has dropped off from what it was. So people, one by one, are waking up.
Can I ask you, John, as a politician, especially in Teal country, how were you treated by the public and by colleagues with your anti-vax stance, and how did you weather that? I'm pretty sure they probably didn't give you a ticker tape parade. I'm just guessing.
Well, look, because there's only one of us out of 42, they sort of think that I think that they generally think I'm a very ideologically pure oddity. And because it's, like with my bill to repeal this thing, they know it's not going to get up. Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
But it's they also know I've got 20 minutes where the whole parliament's got to shut up and listen to me, tell them why they're wrong. And that will seep into some people's minds. And then next parliament will do the same thing again. We'll just keep wearing them down with reality. And then also we can put it on social media, reach a wider audience. And so we are in a tough position, but we're going to make the most of what we've got, which is basically education, waking people up. And I reckon a lot of people out there are easy to wake up these days in the post-COVID era. Almost every person you speak to can tell you somebody in their family or their friend group who had a bad reaction to the bloody COVID vax. So,
absolutely.
Well,
look at Rosie above us.
Yeah, that's how you make anti-vaxxers.
Yes.
That's how you make them, by having an injured child, by having an injured partner, by having a dead friend, and unfortunately, that experience has gone viral, so to speak, and so the public is waking up. It's not our great arguments, I think, that have succeeded. I think it's the sheer volume of harm, and the no jab, no play. That's a mandate. And what have we just experienced through COVID? One of the most heinous things was coercion. Coercion nullifies informed consent, and the state is still engaging in coercion when it comes to the childhood vaccines. It's as simple, to me, it's as simple as that. It's an ethical problem. It's not even whether they work, whether they're responsible largely for the huge chronic health pandemic, especially in the US, but also in Australia. But you're right. They should be curious. What is causing the deterioration and the terrible levels of chronic health in our children and in our population? So to me, it's ethical before it's a scientific discussion, and it's a form of. And after COVID, I don't think we should have any truck with the government mandating any sort of health procedure. Rosie, what do you think?
What are you seeing at the forest? You do the forest all the time. How are the people changing over the years? Are they still getting angry with you, or
No.
are they?
No.
Okay.
No. Yesterday was at Shelley Beach, and the rained until 11 o'clock. Then the rain stopped, and we had a very good 3 hours of talking with people. And then at 4 minutes past 2, which was when we packed up, it started raining quite heavily again. So the sun shines on the forest, and we met some interesting people. But it was about a month ago that I was there previously at Shelley Beach, and I met a really lovely man and his son. His name was Tony, his son was Stefan, and he told me the story of Stefan. And Stefan was standing there quite thrilled to be talked about. Tony had these beautiful twins, fraternal twins, a boy and a girl, and they were babbling, playing with each other, looking at each other, interacting beautifully. Really lovely, bright, exceptionally bright children. He was a smart man. anyway, he took them off for their childhood vaccinations. He ran to the schedule, and at 18 months, they were given their MMR. And almost immediately, I believe it was that night, Stefan started convulsing, having high temperatures. He had a series of adverse reactions, serious adverse reactions. And from that moment on, he was diagnosed as autistic. When the doctors, obviously the daughter had survived, because it's boys who are mostly affected by this. It does seem to be a larger proportion of boys are rendered autistic by these injections for some reason, and little black boys are the ones most affected. So the fact that they're giving Aboriginal children 3 more injections than white children does beg the question as to why. But anyway, that's a diversion. Back to Stefan and his father, Tony. There's a video of them on my social media, but it was very touching because Stefan kept saying, but I'm doing really well now, Dad, aren't I? And, I had a bit of a chat with Stefan during the conversation, but he was very badly affected. And I said to Stefan, are you angry about what happened to you? And he said, yes, I am angry. The father was very kind and very philosophical and very encouraging of Stefan to speak up. But the strangest thing, I mean, this whole forest experience has been such a unique experience. Having done that interview, my husband and I left for home again, and we stopped off in Mona Vale to do a bit of shopping before we went home. And on my way back to the car, I came across a young woman with a very, very new baby. She was breastfeeding the baby while she stood at a playground on our way back to the car. And I said to her, what a gorgeous baby. And I told her about the experience that we've had of a very, very severe injury of a baby in our family. And I said to her, look, I hope you don't mind me telling you about this, but I just want to warn you, you've got a beautiful child. She said, oh, don't worry. We didn't take any of the vaccinations. And I said, oh, that makes my day. But then she said, but I'm really worried about measles because all the mothers in the mothers group keep talking about measles and how frightened they are. And I said, well, it was only 2 hours ago I spoke to someone whose son was injured by the measles vaccine. I'm going to show you the video and you can draw your own conclusions. So I showed her the video and we hugged and she said, well, now I know what to do. So, it's one by one we're seeing this. But, the most shocking thing about these terrible injuries is the medical profession. I swear that anyone medical, with the exception of current present company, the minute you mention anything, like any whisper of looking at vaccines, it's almost like a bucket drops over their head and they won't listen, they won't see, they won't even consider a conversation about it. But in this instance of the little one that was very severely injured, it was at 5 months, the baby got the DTP and the meningococcal one thrown on top, which is quite relevant considering they've got this so-called outbreak in the UK at the moment. And this little one had a cardiac arrest. And the hospital said, oh, no, it's absolutely nothing to do with the vaccine, even though it happened within hours. And they said, next time, when you want the next round of vaccinations, we'll have the cardiac trolley next to the child. I mean, unimaginable. So, and that isn't unique. Virtually every parent you speak to, well, without exception, in fact, with COVID and everything, I mean, it'd only be about 1 in 50 people gets any recognition from anyone medical that the consequences of these vaccines, be they childhood or COVID, have anything to do with the vaccine. It's all just one big coincidence. As for the TGA, I spoke to someone. I went to church on Good Friday. Just in the congregation, there were 2 people there who were very badly injured. And one of them, David, who you'll find the interview again on my social media, David said to me his doctor would not admit to his condition being from the vaccine. He nearly lost his eye and he lost months of work and his life has turned completely upside down and he's still not right. But he said the doctor would not put her name to his condition, but she was happy to submit his medical details to the TGA. That was 4 years ago, and he has not even had so much as a thank you for your email response. Shocking.
Yes, incredible. Can I go back to John for a sec? John, it seems to me like, let's move aside from vaccines, whether they're good or bad, right? Let's push that aside. Surely the question of no jab, no play is choice, freedom of choice. And this little baby comes out of the womb into this world where it's going to spend so much time. and straight away it's jabbed. It has no choice, and then it gets the next ones. So it has no choice whatsoever. And if there are consequences, it lives with them. And society just goes, we don't know what caused it, even if we did, because the evidence is pretty substantial that it's caused by vaccines. Why don't people care so much about choice? I know you're a libertarian. I really sort of lean towards you. That's what my whole stance really is freedom of choice. Your body, your choice. And why doesn't that sort of resonate with people, do you think?
I think that there has been this very successful brainwashing campaign going on for a long time, like 50 years, maybe more. There's so much money at stake. And that means, and these pharmaceutical companies are not owned by individuals, they're owned by like there's not dominant shareholders. It's not like somebody like a Kerry Packer figure owns 50% of Pfizer. It's all spread out on the stock market now. So who's really making money? I mean, if you own shares in Pfizer or whatever and they're going up, you might get a bit of a dividend, but it's not going to really change your life. The people whose life it is really going to change are the senior executives, the people who are, earning, $1 million plus and who might get a big bonus, might get $1 million bonus. Now, there's a lot of these people, okay, across the world, across the whole pharmaceutical industry, and these people are heavily incentivized to keep the whole thing going. And so they don't make the argument that people with concerns about the vaccine industry are wrong. They make the case that they are evil. And so there's no point discussing it with them. And that was basically, with prior to COVID, very, very few people were in that very fringe group who were saying, well, I'm not so sure about this. I think in the post-COVID era, that is a growth stock, the people who were having their doubts about the pharmaceutical industry. But it's the brainwashing. Okay, so if you're a politician, I've worked out that they've really got two, there's some ideologues in there, but most of them have really got two objectives on their mind. One is to get re-elected, and then the other is to move up in the pecking order in the parliament. So, if you're a new member of the Labor Party, you've just arrived, you're sitting around, you're, young in your early 30s and you think you're pretty hot. You might have been the president of New South Wales Young Labor. You think, I might be the premier one day. So I just got to keep moving up the ladder. Every time there's a reshuffle, I want to move up the ladder. And how do you get rewarded by moving up the ladder? Being a good boy or girl, being very deferential to the system. Okay, not sort of going out and speaking about wacky things. So when someone comes along to you and says, I think the COVID vax might have been too rushed and maybe people are getting sick, they're not looking at it and saying, well, I wonder if that's true or not. They're thinking, okay, well, if I champion that cause, that's going to hurt my promotions. So I'm not interested in having a discussion with you. That's where we're at. Now, what we're trying to reverse with this current bill is we're trying to reverse what happened in 2017, no jab, no play. Now, prior to that, what was the arrangement? Prior to that, if you were a parent and you want to send your little, Johnny or Mary down to the local childcare centre and, you were asked to provide a vaccine schedule for them at the preschool, whatever. But you could sign a form saying I am a conscientious objector. So you might have been an objector for health reasons or for religious reasons or for whatever reasons. But there was what you weren't being lazy. You would, and some parents were in that category. But there were.
I'm in that category. Right. We did that. Yeah. And
you didn't have to explain why. Is that correct, Michael? No. You just said, right. I tick the box, I'm a conscientious objector.
We got ripped apart by a doctor. He was so furious. When we came back the next time, he apologized. But, and my ex-partner was the really driving force behind it. And he tore her to shreds, but she wouldn't back down. And she was unvaccinated. She'd never had a vaccine either. She's one of the rare people. So, I was more like, why won't we do it? Because I was in part of the brainwash. I never questioned it. Why should I? These are scientists. These are governments. They're there to care for us. Why would they put something onto us that was poisonous into our children? How could they? They're human beings. So that's what stops a lot of people going, they've got kids too. But then you realize money has a big sway. Anyway, sorry, John, keep going.
Well, so now what they Malcolm Turnbull, a lot of bad things started with Malcolm Turnbull. But while he was the Prime Minister, they brought this in. Now these policies are state-based policies, but Malcolm Turnbull championed it. Then all the states had to ratify it. So a Liberal government in New South Wales ratified it. Now, it was about basically taking out the conscientious objector get out clause. And it was also about sort of, there were, not the world's not best parents were just sort of, they probably had an intention to vaccinate their kid. They didn't get around to it. They've turned up at the childcare, and the childcare says, okay, look, your kid can't come, but go and get them vaxxed, and then they can come. And that category of parent will say, okay, cool, I'll be back next week after they've had their vax. Okay. But what we have done is we have now removed the conscientious objective, of which there's a lot more people these days. Now, what this has seen is there's been a big rise, and I just hope it keeps growing. Homeschooling. Why homeschooling? Well, then you can set your own vax policy. That's one part of it. And I don't think there's much of a vax policy at most of these homeschooling events. Now, so what we're going to do is we're going to try and get it reversed. Now, sometimes if we can get either the Liberal Party or the Labor Party to agree to one of our, bold bills, then we've got a hope of getting it up. But I can't see any hope of the Labor Party or the Liberal Party agreeing with this motion. So, but we're going to, it's given me an opportunity to come on shows like this and to speak with your audience about
that's right.
Why
So
we're
you're seed
moving
planting.
still.
You're seed planting. You're seed planting.
That's
That
right.
you and you're in a position to plant seeds of people we can't reach, which is it's a really important place. It's a really
If we're
important
going to
goal.
really overturn this thing in the next 10 years, which is very much what the goal is, we have to get the message out there. We have to get the message out there in an intelligent way to make it and who can argue against it? I mean, have we seen since there has been a big drop off in the amount of people kids taking vaccines? Okay, look, I think it's gone from about 95% to about 85%. Okay, and the media's calling this a crisis. Now, still a lot of people getting vaccines, but there's an increasing number who aren't. Now, those figures are very rough if anyone's taking those, so double check it. But that's in the vicinity of that. Okay, well, look, why don't we see how they're going? How are these kids going who haven't taken the vax? Okay,
Great idea.
Now I'm not. I think I asked Kerry Chand at Budget Estimates. I said, what have we got any curiosity in this? The head of the Department of Health. All I got is just waffle. They're not interested.
Yeah, Kerry Chan, she's an interesting thing. Can I just move to one other subject though? Because you are such a libertarian, how are you dealing with the attacks on freedom of speech, especially by New South Wales? And now we've got in Queensland, you can't sing Johnny Farnham's song, from the river to the sea. I mean, we're in insane territory. How do you deal with it as a libertarian?
Well, look, it's extremely frightening.
Yes.
You can think you're a free country. You can think then you just do a few little tweaks to free speech, and then before you know it, you can fall off the cliff very, very quickly. And the Americans got it right. When they wrote their constitution and they put in a Bill of Rights, and they originally wrote the Constitution, which was about how the federal government was going to work, had the presidency, everything. Okay, that was just going for a couple of years. This is in about 1788. At the same time, the first fleet turned up in here in Sydney Harbour. Then about 2 years later, the sort of the libertarian-minded founding fathers said, "Oh, look, we've just created this big government. We need to put some handbrakes on it because these things can get a bit out of control." This was Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin. I'm not sure if Benjamin. Good people, they're really good people. Okay, and that was called the Bill of Rights, and they had amended the Constitution to those 10 amendments. Now, the first amendment is the Congress. So we've just created this big, powerful thing called the Congress, but they've said absolutely not. The Congress cannot pass any law that prohibits what the people can say. So now that's a very and why has America been such a creative and dynamic country? Now, sure, you can write 50 books about the problems of America. Okay, but you can also write a lot more books about the success of America. How are the four of us people talking tonight? I think Michael's in Western Australia. We're not in the same room. Magnificent technology invented by the Americans. Okay, but we could have someone here in Russia or Belgium, and they'd feel like they were in our room. Who put man on the moon? Who built the internet? Okay, and modern air travel, and America's been a really great country. And I know I'm often critical of them. Okay, but I mean, but they're very creative, and that's because the people walk around knowing that I can think whatever I want.
Yeah,
I can say whatever I want, and the government will not shut me up. And that just encourages innovation and dynamism, and it's so sacred. And what we're seeing now, it's almost every week Parliament sits. Chris Minns has thought up a whole new range of restricting free speech, and it always starts. This is how they get people on board with it. They say, "Wow, we believe in free speech, but we've got to stamp down on the Nazis." And everyone's like, "Oh, we all hate the Nazis. There's not many of them yet. Okay, let's make an exception to our free speech over that." And then it's pedophiles, and then it's terrorists. Okay. So they get people on board with the big three most evil groups of people on the planet. Okay, and then they say, "Oh, well, we need these laws. We need these laws." Okay, but then they bring those laws in and they affect everybody else. Okay, and Britain, Great Britain, 10,000 door knocks a year over social media posts. This is. They don't do that in Russia and China. Well, they do it, but they don't do it as much in Britain. And Chris Minns has just sent over a delegation to Britain and to Germany to learn best practice in policing hate. And he's got all the laws in place now for door knocks. So
they should send the Melbourne police, because they've had a lot of experience of beating up grandmothers, and that's what they'll be arresting at home when they go around to fake, because some grandmother was put on Facebook post something about whatever. The reality of what's happening in the UK.
If there's people out there on a Sunday night, Easter Sunday, watching Cafe Lockout, you are a prime target to get a door knock at some point over social media. Okay. Now, and I would like to make an appeal, 2 appeals to the people who could be in that category one day. In fact, I'd like to put a challenge out to people. If you haven't had a door knock from the police in the next 3 years over a social media post, you're not trying hard enough. But hopefully we can stop it. Because when it starts, if it starts, I think it will. They've got the apparatus in place. But if it does start, I'd encourage everyone. And it happens at 5:30 in the morning. They want to catch you, wake you up, put you off guard, so you open your mouth. 2 important things. Number 1, start filming it. It's going to be great social media, and it will get it out there, and it will make other people feel confident they can do it, and it'll embarrass the police, and it'll embarrass Chris Minns. So number 1, start filming. And number 2, shut your mouth. Confirm your name, be polite, and just say, "I prefer to talk to my solicitor before I talk to you," or say, "I'm exercising my right to silence." But just confirm your name, and do not let them in the house. If they always say, "Can we come into your house?" They want to come into your house just to sort of, threaten you a bit more. Say, "Well, have you got a search warrant?" Now, 90% of the time, they won't have a search warrant if it's just over a social media post. But if they don't say, "No, I don't consent to that, so please no," and they can't go in. No.
And that's the importance of filming it.
What's that? Sorry.
The importance of filming it is if they can't come back and say that you let them in. No, you have to film it. This is so important. In fact, if there's 2 people, they get everybody filming it.
You want to film it to make them look like the Gestapo goons that they are. Make them feel ashamed of what they're doing at the street level and at the political level and at the police commissioner level. Make them ashamed. Now, if you go out there and you start using the F word and the C word, you're bad PR for us. Now, you will be good PR for us if you're nice and polite. Okay, but you don't have to say much. So nice and polite to me. You just have to say, "Yes, my name is John Ruddick." And they'll say, "Did you say that social media post?" And you know what, everyone, because you just woke up at 5:30, you're going to think, "Am I dreaming? There's 3 cops at the door over my social media post." When you were drinking last night at 1:30 and you had a bit of whiskey and you got into a fight with your second cousin. And then you start saying things that you regret, okay? And then the cops come round, and the first thing you're going to want to say is, "Oh, look, that was my cousin. We were half joking. I'd been drinking a bit. We'd been arguing about it before. He said worse things than me." Okay. All that is going to get you in trouble. Just don't say anything. And they'll usually just go away. If you say nothing, they'll just go away because they've got no evidence. Now, so that's what I think.
Can you believe we're having this discussion in 2026 in Australia? And we have the Honourable John Ruddick on here, senator in New South Wales, teaching us how to protect ourselves from the government. And if Albo had his way, there would have been hate speech laws across the country. Absolutely. I mean, right now, if there are like these betting stores, the TAB, they should be having a running bet for who of us gets arrested first. Who in the freedom community is going to go down with that? Is it Rosemary Marshall we're going to see, led into the
Dewey
cop
van.
shop? Yeah, in the divvy van. Is it Paul? Is it? Are they going to? Every time I go live now, I think, is this it? Is this it? And I've actually been quite obnoxious sometimes on purpose just to see what they do. You know what I mean? And but here you are waiting for it. And there's talk of it everywhere. I mean, Jacinta Ardern, basically, if you break down what she said free speech is like a weapon of war, and the only way to protect it is with censorship. I mean, that's basically what she said. That came here and came out of her mouth and kind of made sense to her. And the only way it makes
Remember when she said in the middle of COVID, if you hear something about COVID and it's not from the government, it's not the truth. We are your only source of truth. That's how these people think. Mark Latham often makes this point in Parliament that if you go back to the 1950s, the 60s, and the 70s, who was championing free speech back then? The left, because the left weren't in power. And who was getting tapped by ASIO? Who was getting door knocked by intelligence agencies and things? The left was, okay. Communists and people who were associated with communism, okay. And, some people might say, well, we can make an exception for free speech. But Robert Menzies tried to ban the Communist Party, and he was a great prime minister. But, in his twilight, after he retired, he wrote a very good book called Afternoon Light, and he said, I've got 2 regrets. One of his regrets was trying to ban the Communist Party. So people in power will always think and find ways to justify, centering down free speech. But now all around the world, the left runs the world. They run the European Union, they run the culture around the world, and they're running Australia at the moment. And so Albo's just up there. He just says, he just openly says, I don't like social media. All the terrible things being said on social media. He said at the National Press Club the other day, I like the old days when we just had 3 TV stations, 3 radio stations, and 3 newspapers. Well, Mr. Prime Minister, they all said the same thing. And now little machines come along called the internet. And people can say whatever they want. And a lot of people say a lot of crap on the internet. But if you just put everything out there, if everyone can have their say, over time, truth will rise. If we just have a free market in ideas. And this is what the internet is providing. And this is why people like Albanese and others do not like the internet.
He also said recently that anyone who votes for One Nation wants to go back in time, something like that. They want to go back. We're never going back in time. And then he comes out, he wants to go back in time.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Rosie, every time you go live now, and you do great work, Rosie, you simply do great work. Every time you go live, does it go in your head, this could get me done?
No, never think about it. No, even when I was just reminded from this conversation of when we were outside the ABC. I'd love to go outside the ABC again because I've misquoted something in one of my little videos, which I've taken down now, where it was about this recent admission on their part that a very small of 1% of people have been injured by the COVID injections. And unfortunately, I actually said, 1%, which of course would be 1 in 100. And after I'd taken it down, I actually thought, well, that's probably just about the number. But I was just thinking about the time outside the ABC where the journalists were all hiding inside, hoping that they wouldn't be attacked by a grandmother in a pink raincoat or, any of the other septuagenarians who are outside. And a policeman came up to me and he said to me, are you in charge? And I said, oh, no, we're all pretty equal here. And then he said, oh, well, can I have your name and phone number? And I just gave him a bit of a smile, a squeeze on his arm, very familiar, and said, look, I don't give my phone number and name to strange men, sorry. And he smiled and he laughed and he said, oh, well, just don't get in the way of the people on the pavement. I said, oh, no, I wouldn't do that. And that was the end of it. I actually think they're probably embarrassed by all that nonsense. That whole day was really, honestly, it was comic, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a protest. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
They were cowering in their offices. They were terrified. They were terrified of these grandmothers, and and they were taking the back exit of the building to keep away from us. But you know, it was an incredible day actually, because we had the forest there with the, and at first one of the security guys started pulling these um, um, sticks out of the ground, and we had to convince him no soil, no garden is being harmed by these tiny bamboo sticks, and the team of the forest did a great job talking him down, which is glad, because I was starting to get a bit irritated at what he was doing. And then later on, I see him walking around and actually looking at the forest and at the pictures and the vignettes. So it was an incredible day. But the ABC staff, they such cowards, you know, and such misrepresentation of who was outside and why we were outside.
And such misrepresentation of the numbers of people damaged. I mean, just yesterday at the forest, I don't think I could count up how many people said that they'd had shocking reactions. One of the saddest ones yesterday was a very elderly couple who came up and was showing a lot of interest in the flags. And it turned out that they had a daughter who spent the last 5 years bedridden. And it just makes me so angry when I hear of, well, I would say we heard probably about 10 or 12 people yesterday who've been badly hurt. And then to think that the ABC aerially says, oh, it's just a small fraction of 1%. And they showed 2 people whose injuries have been shocking, absolutely terrible. But, you know, the same sort of injuries that many people who are in the forest have suffered as well. And no one's paying any attention. But I do think that it's the childhood vaccine we have to pay attention to now, because the numbers of children now that are getting damaged is just off the scale. And I just had a look at the schedule again, because they keep changing it. The latest number is that there are 41 injections given to children before they reach 4 and 44 to Aboriginal children. But I think the thing that shocked me the most was looking at what they do to 6-week-old babies and 4-month-old babies. They give both 6 weeks and 4 months, they get 8 injections. And they're the DTP, Hep B, polio, Haemophilus influenza B, pneumococcal, rotavirus, and meningococcal for Aboriginal children. And you know they only get a small amount of grace before they're assaulted with the next lot. So I just really want us to make sure that we're all aware of the suffering that these children are having. And there's no question that there's a huge amount of inflammation that results in them being injected with that much poison. So I'm really grateful that John is wanting to hear about this, and I'm really hoping that we can get somewhere. You only need one trip on the Vax bus and meeting these parents who've said they've spent 47 years changing their daughter's nappy to make you think their lives have been destroyed. So,
Rosie, have you noticed how, Rosie and John, have you noticed how recently there's been Current Affair, ABC has had a show on COVID vaccine, and I noticed it's not just Australia. There was a recent report I saw out of America where again they were talking about the COVID vaccine injuries, and so it's very interesting. But you know, I see them as propaganda organizations. So I'm asking myself, well, why now? Why now are they suddenly talking about?
Can I answer that, Paul? When you're ready.
Go on. Well, my theory is that all the reports they mentioned, 5,000, the magic number, because they're anchoring on the idea that, only 5,000 people were badly trashed. And yes, the process was Byzantine and Kafkaesque, and they had to wait perhaps years to get a judgment. But so what they're doing is it's sort of like they're focusing on those details to limit the scope, because it's way more than 5,000 people have been injured in Australia, and you see they can cope with the liability of 5,000 injuries. They wouldn't be able to cope with the liability of 500,000. You know.
More to the point. Well, I think.
Can I just say, just quickly? I think the one thing that is the thorn in Pfizer's side, the thorn in the government side, is this: a mobile phone. Because we have X, Instagram, all the others that put up, because we're in a propaganda war. I mean, it's propaganda constantly. I was talking to a young person the other day. She said her young people, they're not interested now. They're not interested in the war. There's some new virus, new variant, cicada. They don't talk about it. They don't care because they're just being fed fear from this propaganda, army, and they've switched off. It's not bothering them anymore. And one of the things I think why Pfizer now is allowing these interviews to go ahead on ABC, and obviously they've got permission, is because they're trying to. They realize they have to do something. They can't just ignore it because, Rosemary, you're doing it. But every time I get on Twitter, there's someone else. There's people dying everywhere. There's huge questions now. People watching it. It's got to a point they have to address it. And so I think they're trying to address it softly, that way. And what are your thoughts, John? I'll come back, Rosemary.
Look, it is an interesting phenomenon that, yes, poor Dr. Oosterhuis is correct. It's not just in Australia. That there has been corporate media having a, reasonably critical look at the vaccine industry. Okay. And we must acknowledge that is good news. Now, before COVID, the left was quite skeptical of the vaccine industry. They were. It was a left wing, like you go to the Greens and stuff, they used to hate the pharmaceutical industry and they used to be skeptical of them. Now, then what happened during COVID, then there's sort of the hard left, because it was a big part of COVID in 2020, I believe, was sort of about undermining President Trump. The left had got so worked up about President Trump being, this threat to the world and everything. Well, they might have been right now with Iran, but anyway. But the hysteria of COVID, there'd already been, an impeachment. The left are deranged now about Trump, but they were a lot more deranged in his first term. And I think just that whole environment, and so it was very much the left loved COVID mania and the vaccine stuff. Now, I think what's happened in the years since COVID is that I think some people in positions of power and corporate media and others are maybe starting to get a little bit angry, a little bit cranky at the lies that they were told. Well, you saw Carl Sanderlands this week. Did you see that? Now he was paid to make the big vax baby. That he was, and about 3 months later, he was out there saying, take the vax, and he's getting paid a lot of money. And then about 3 months later, he got COVID. And he said on his air, because he's pretty sort of frank talker, sort of speaks his mind. He said, gee, they paid us all that money to make that COVID vaccine. Here, I took all the vax, and I've got COVID. Gee, this is way back then. He was already being a good boy back then. Now he's come out and he's hardcore. So, no, I think some people, and people, when they have been lied to and they sincerely believe that lie, well, they're going to start to get cranky. So it's up to people like us to keep the pressure up. We should be thankful and grateful when the corporate media starts to take an interest in vaccine industries, regardless of what the motive is. We should be saying, well, that's good. We need to have a discussion about this.
Do you know, John, do you know how that happened, John? Jackie Dundee was outside the federal court. She was there with Rod Carleton and Dr. Beverly Pierce, who was wrongfully dismissed over the COVID vaccine. So she was pushing the constitutional rights of Australians, and she saw this palaver of meat press outside, and she decided to sort of photobomb it, and she said to them, "You guys." You're not, when Carl made those comments about people being injured and how you shouldn't mandate and it was wrong and that he was misled, she said to them, you guys should be reporting this. Did they report it? No. They just said, our press conference with Carl was set upon by by anti-vaxxers. So it wasn't the media reporting it. It was the alternative media that reported it. And it was serendipity because she was out there saying, guys, we're pushing for your rights. And why isn't the media reporting on these constitutional issues that we're fighting for? So just a note
That's
about
very
that.
interesting.
Yeah,
I did not know
Zoltan.
that background.
Zoltan is the name of the man that got Carl. He's a friend of mine. And I just want to say to everyone watching, there he is under pressure, all these people around him, and he got really calm. He was really respectful to Kyle, or whatever his name is, and he got him to say what he did. And I think it's a huge applause under pressure. And he showed that anti-vaxxers were not all these mad guys yelling and screaming this. He was actually just trying to make a point. I thought it was one of the greatest moments of the last few years, actually, to be honest.
It's been very good.
Before we go on, while we've got John here, there's so much to go on. I know about COVID, but a lot of people are telling us now. I did a walk in the streets that they're over the COVID issue now. They want to talk about the war and the cost of living. So could we just move on to that while we just have John here, if that's okay? Because what are your thoughts, John? There's a lot of people who are pro-Trump, but now we have this war, which has also exposed the shortfallings of our government, that we have no fuel reserves. Even though we're standing on oceans of oil, we're up to shit, to basically. How is that going in Parliament with you? And then I'll go to Rosemary. Is she picking any, and even Paul, how are they picking that up of where you are? Because in Perth, a lot of people are very concerned. But how's it from you, John, in Parliament?
Well, look, Trump came down the golden escalator in June 2015, and I was pretty much on the Trump train before. I've been around right-wing people in the Liberal Party and media for 30 years. And I was saying, I love Trump. This is in 2015, okay? And I stuck with Trump. I was loyal to Trump. And I loved Trump. And I thought Trump was a magnificent president in his first term. Dealt a very difficult hand. I thought he was, handcuffed, and they were, saying he was illegitimate and all this stuff, and he'd stolen it, Russiagate. And he got us into no new wars in his first term, and he made the economy go good. Now, then I believe he had the election stolen from him in 2020, and I believe it's a really legendary comeback. After looking like he's going to get it, they kept trying to arrest him, and I think he's a good man. He's got a good family, and I loved his agenda that he got elected on last time. He was the Doge. This is what the Libertarians really loved about Trump. He said he was going to halve the size of the government. He was talking at one point about getting rid of income tax. So he was going to, the Department of Government Efficiency, he said, we've got Elon Musk, and for that, Ramaswamy, we're going to halve the size of the government, and we're going to do all these great things, no more wars. Now, then after he got elected when he, in this current term, I think Trump has now suffered hubris. I think he now thinks he's a Roman emperor. And I now think that he's just become a megalomaniac, and his family is making squillions. And this did not happen in the first term. There's about 30 people in the Trump family, when you're taking the cousins and the uncles and the aunts and the grandkids now, they're all business people, and they're all out there, whether they're selling handbags or skyscrapers or whatever. And I don't like it at all. And after the Venezuelan success, and look, from a military point of view, it was a success. But I said at the time, I don't like this, because now it's going to embolden Trump to do more things like this on the global stage. Okay, and now he's gone into Iran. Now, I think there were better ways to deal with Iran, and now this is a absolute mess. And this is everyone's a loser out of this. The Gulf states are all getting smashed up. Innocent people are getting killed. All around, every human being on the planet, having to suffer from the higher fuel. And this is what Trump told us he's not going to do. And now he's been, I believe, tricked into it. So, yes, I am sadly off the Trump train. I think that we should always be grateful to Trump and remember what he once was. I mean, I've completely given up on him now. But I think we should be grateful that he did make the anti-war right, which I proudly belong to. Anti-war has usually been associated with the left. No, I am anti-war right, like Tucker Carlson. Okay, and a lot of good people, a lot of smart people in the US these days are very anti all these regime change wars. I'll tell you who else is very against these regime change wars. Western soldiers that have gone and fought in them, whether they're American or Australian, and they've been over there in Afghanistan, and Iraq, and Libya, and Syria, and soon to probably be Iran. And they are the really great people, Australians and Americans, and they do not like these wars, and they can see through it. So we should be grateful for Trump. And look, I support what he did in plugging the southern border. All the criminals from Guatemala and Honduras were just walking up, coming into America. The Democrats were encouraging it because they were importing new voters. It was as simple as that, bringing in criminals to. Okay, so Trump ended that. Good. Trump comes out and says all the global warming stuff is just, he says, BS. John Howard and Tony Abbott knew it was BS. They didn't have the courage to say it was BS. Trump said from the beginning, it's BS, it's garbage, it's making it up. And he's terrific on that. He's terrific on all the transgender psychodrama and all the woke stuff. So, yeah, I still love Trump. Okay, but I mean, I remember what Trump was, and I don't like what Trump's now becoming anti-free speech. We were talking about free speech before. He's now becoming anti-free speech. So this is what happens. The government, high office, corrupts people. This is why the really radical libertarians believe we can phase the government out entirely over time. Okay? And people think, oh my God, it'll be anarchy. It'll be anarchy. Okay, well, look, let's not have that. Maybe we can come back on for another Sunday night, Michael.
I think that's an interesting discussion. I just want to hear.
We could do it over 50 years, but the really radical libertarians say it's necessary because even when you get someone good like Trump, they get corrupted. Okay, and now with our favourite issue here, vaccines. If there was no government, how would we handle the regulation of vaccines? Okay, I'll tell you how we do it. And this is how we should do it even with the government. At the moment, to get a drug approved for sale in Australia, you have to get approval from the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, which is a government body. Okay, now it's funded by the pharmaceutical industry about 92%. But we'll put that little fact aside. But to get a drug approved, you have to go through one little forum, okay, which is run by the government. Okay, now, if the libertarians were in power, what we would have is we would shut down that government department and we would encourage the rise of a competitive market of about 4 or 5 companies. And these would be like rating agencies. Okay, now let's say me and Dr. Oosterhouse started Ruddick Oosterhouse Pharmaceutical Rating Company, where we would say, look, we're the best pharmacists in the world. We're the smartest pharmacists in the world. We know what's good for you and what's bad for you. And we personally, under our, people pay for our advice. And we would say our advice is take that one, but don't take that one. Now, then there might be another company, the Rosie Michael Griffith Rating Agency. They might say, no, we don't agree with John and Paul. We think that you should take that one. Well, look, Rosie probably say, no, don't take any. But let's just for the theory, let's put that aside for a moment. Okay. Under this process, Rosie, we might all end up taking none. Okay, this is a way to bring it about. If we have competitive rating agencies that say, no, well, we think that one's fine, but that one's not fine, and then people would say, okay, well, look, when Ruddick and Oosterhouse make a recommendation, they've got a very good track record of picking what's bad and what's not bad, and then your rating agency would learn from ours. And so rather than having a big, powerful, central, I know everything, if you don't obey with me, you get stomped on. If we had like a competitive market of these rating agencies, now what could easily happen then, Rosie Marshall, is that all those rating agencies could eventually, no one could be prepared, might get to the point where no one is prepared to endorse these vaccines. They say, look, I'm not going to risk my reputation on it. Mm-hmm. That can't happen at the moment because it's the bloody government that doesn't get any competitive pressure to be delivering the best result in terms of the best healthcare for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
John, do you know what the missing ingredient is? Independence. No. There needs to be You see, you said, like TGA 96% funded by, you said 92, I think it's a bit high, but it's a high number funded by farmers. So they're not independent. No. When you're getting paid by the same entity you're regulating, and they call it conflict of interest, and they try to remove that. You've got to remove that, and the way you remove that is by allowing truly independent review and transparency of data. And one of the issues we've had with the COVID shot, I don't call it a vaccine, I call it what it is, a synthetic gene injection. The problem is that there's been no transparency. They're pushing data which is in some cases synthetic, as in AI generated, and they say, just trust me, bro. We're good, but they don't make the actual data, the raw data, available for things. So rather than just rating, the key thing is you've got to remove the corruption, because as I often say, conflict of interest is just a polite way of saying corruption. We have to get the corruption out.
Now, Paul, what would happen here is, okay, so a lot of people take your view. I agree with everything you just said. There is it's like, oh, you've got all the ingredients for a massive conflict of interest in what's happening at the moment. And people say, well, the system's not wrong. We just got to clean it out and get better people in there. No, we say it's not the people. The system is going to always deliver a perverse outcome. So we should have competition. So you could assemble, like if there was no rating agencies in the world, let's say God spoke from heaven and said, thou shalt, 11th commandment, there shall never be anything like the TGA, but everything else in the world is the same. Now, what would happen is then you might get the best 10 chemists in the world who say, look, we've started this rating agency and we're going to look into it better than anyone else about whether these medicines are good or bad for you. Okay, and then it'll be competition, and that's how we will get the truth. Because those rating agencies, if they keep making bad recommendations, they'll go bust, they'll go bankrupt. If the TGA keeps making bad recommendations, they just stay in business. Nothing touches them.
Yeah, there's got to be accountability. There's no accountability, and this is a bit of a hot button issue for me at the moment, because they finally did get a ACIP committee in the US, under Robert Kennedy Jr. And the meeting that the federal courts scuttled by saying that the people on the ACIP committee constituted by RFK were not qualified, the papers that were due to be presented were mind-blowing and would have changed the world, and the world didn't hear it. Yeah. And the ACIP committee wasn't that they were unqualified. They were that activist judge got rid of the most qualified ACIP committee that they'd ever seen, the one with the least conflict of interest, and I'm really disturbed that that's happened, because the danger is that they're now going to reconstitute with a corrupt and conflicted business as usual committee, and one of the big tweets of the week, John, was the FOIA looking at the batch data, and the government provided 70. I won't say the exact
78.
Okay, you're giving away 78 pages of black ink, of black ink.
Yeah, all redacted. Yeah.
So no transparency. No transparency.
Yeah.
So this is out of the Commonwealth government or the American government?
No, this was a TGA FOIA, and one of the things that I said that it was completely redacted, but actually there were a few numbers and letters here and there representing batches, and then all the data about them was redacted. And Sharon Cousins, who we know, said, actually, we know this batch really well. And she talked to people who were affected by it and said, yes, this was a killer batch. Did the government respond by giving us the data that responds to that batch? No. So this is what I mean. We've still, the lack of transparency is a real problem. And the batch data was something that I raised a few years ago in New Zealand when I met with Barry Young and had a look at the New Zealand pay per dose data. And that was one of the interviews I did with him. We were talking about the just mind-blowing variation in the batches that they were seeing in New Zealand and say this can't be a safe product. With this, it can't conform to safe manufacturing practices. The government beat down his door, arrested him, threw him in jail, is engaging him in lawfare, and went to remove all the copies of the interviews off the internet, under legal force to silence. So this is batches for you. Just the question of was this a uniform product? Was it manufactured in the way that we would expect? And it clearly wasn't. And this is what I mean. Those black pages is the antithesis of transparency. We need independence and transparency.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Rosemary?
Well, I was disappointed. My understanding is that the dismantling of that ACIP committee means that the Hep B, which they were going to suggest shouldn't be given to babies, if it was off the vaccine schedule for children, it would have left them open for prosecution for malfeasance or bad outcomes. So the fact that that whole thing's been thrown back again means that Hep B also has been thrown back. That's my understanding. But it's just so upsetting to think that Robert Kennedy might be losing ground and completely ignored. The whole thing was completely ignored by the New South Wales Health. I mean, I keep looking at what they're recommending, and they're still pushing all these injections. It was completely ignored, the suggestions that were made in America, and I think they've kind of been dismissed now, is my understanding. I'm hoping that they'll be reinstated. You did say before about my impressions about how people are taking the news, and when I'm mixing with young people, I'm sorry I'm going back a bit, but I'm quite keen to.
You go.
I've been speaking to a lot of youngish women, and one in particular today I had a chat with. She's 35. I don't think they're taking a lot of notice of what's happening in the wider world, other than the fact that they are suffering financially and they're very conscious of the cost of everything. But the subject that seems to dominate them is their infertility. And I'm hearing a lot about infertility. And I think it's worth mentioning because it's a very touchy thing. These girls who have taken the Hep B vaccine, this particular girl I was talking to was one of the first to take the Hep B. Sorry, I'm saying the wrong thing. I meant
COVID.
Gardasil. Yeah, sorry, I'm hooked on Hep B. She was one of the first.
You got a lot to pick from.
Well, she was one of the first, and she's 35, so she was in about year 9 when this happened. She was saying out of 190 girls in her class, that 10 of them have had problems with their fertility. Sorry, let me just make sure I've got this. She said she got a high-grade squamous cell epithelial lesion, which was operated on when she was 15. And 10 other girls that she knows of, there could have been others that she knows of, were equally affected. But 50% of her school friends seem not to be able to conceive, and it's a big subject with them. But also, tragically, out of her year group, 2 of her friends lost 3-year-old children to leukemia, and that was just recent. So,
we're hearing the same over here, Rosemary.
Yeah, so I just didn't want that to go by the by. That is a big issue.
I think this is really important. I think this is important of a campaign.
So, I'm talking about Gardasil, so I'm sorry I kept saying Hep B.
No, but it still is. We've got infertile. I mean, I think was it you, Paul, who told me, or they're talking like 20, almost 24% or 25%.
Australian fertility is falling off a cliff, and it's also gotten worse since the COVID synthetic gene injections, and speaking of record level data, there's the check data, and there are experimental models where they've shown that like 60% egg loss in mammals that were given the shot, and we're seeing nearly 1/3 less successful pregnancies in the vaccinated population on the check data. So that we're seeing fertility plummet, and we have evidence that I've been talking about for years, and it's being censored. It's with the Lighthouse Declaration did a roundtable with IVF experts and pediatricians from around the world, obstetricians, Dr. Kim Biss, who's a lighthouse keeper, who's lost her job on ASIP now because of what I was talking about. And we were trying to get the message out that there is a fertility angle to this, which is, of course, existential for our species. And it is being censored, it is being blocked, it is being attacked. When you're over the target, this is what happens. And I'm a bit sick of it. Rather than the censorship easing up, even now that it's common knowledge, even now that it goes on ABC News and Channel 9 Current Affair, you better believe that the censorship is still thick and heavy.
Amyloid clots are a subject that no one wants to bring up.
Yeah, no one. We've had mine, Hirschman and stuff. Yeah, no one wants to talk about them.
One of the people who deals in this said that he did an autopsy on a newborn child that died from amyloid clots. So, and also the inadequate placentas, the calcified placentas. I had a chat with a funeral director the other day, and she told me the story of one of her fellow funeral directors dealing with a baby that had been born at 25 weeks because the placenta had been calcified and the child couldn't be nourished sufficiently. So the child was born early, and they gave it a Hep B shot, and the baby died. I mean, it's just beyond belief to inject a premature child.
And Rosie, how many people did they study before they approved the Hep B injection?
147 babies for 5 days.
100, and they followed them up for 5 days, and then on the basis of that,
the adjuvant that they put in most of these injections, because both Gardasil and Hep B have got quite a lot of aluminium in them. And I think it's 250 micrograms for a baby. Can you imagine that? I mean, you can imagine their brains getting inflamed with that. But Brett Weinstein and Toby Rogers had the conversation about the adjuvant, and they were just left spellbound and almost sort of not quite laughing at each other. But the adjuvant was tested on 4 white rabbits in New Zealand. 1 ran away and 3 died, so they put it in all the injections.
That's the level of evidence. That's the level of evidence, John, that your colleagues, and this is a shot that we give to babies. Welcome to the world. Here, studied on 147 kids for 5 days, and you started off saying, long term in Pfizer, you learned that you have to study these shots for 10, 15 years. Why? Because long term effects can take years to show up, and you can't speed up time.
So, Paul, were you I mean, you and I got to know each other reasonably well during COVID, but were you a vax skeptic because of COVID, or were you already a vax skeptic pre-COVID?
I was pretty naive. I accepted vaccines, but about 5 years before COVID, they put up a sign on the operating theatre door one day saying, you must get this year's flu shot, or you have to wear a mask around patients for the next 12 months. And I had a robust discussion with my colleagues. I looked at the Cochrane review on the flu shot efficacy, and it was really, really poor. And then I looked at mask effectiveness, and there were studies even then showing that, for things like influenza, it was not protective for healthcare workers working in A&E. So I knew that I had evidence. I came to them. I said, "Come on, guys, this doesn't make sense." Both the masking, which I saw as a form of coercion, and the reason I pushed back was because the year before I was a good boy. I had my flu shot, and I was sick for 10 days. I couldn't work. And then 4 weeks later, I had the worst flu.
Immediately after the shot.
Yeah. And then 4 weeks later, I had a flu-like illness, which was, again, the worst flu I'd ever had. And so the year later, when I saw that sign on the operating theatre door, I thought, no, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to push back. And they listened. But then COVID came, and there was no more listening. It's our way or the highway, So
John, can I ask you another question? As a culture now, we're in the center of a perfect ideological storm. We've still got the trans thing is ideological. Vaccines are the same. They're almost like religions. Climate change. And they are all, they are collapsing as we're watching, and yet still be supported by the government. And there seems to be an insanity, and there doesn't seem to be any hope anywhere. But in Argentina, there's another man who we never hear anything about, and that's Javier. How do you say his? Yeah.
Javier Milei.
What are your thoughts on him and what he's doing in Argentina? We get so little news from there, just snippets in X. And if it wasn't for X, we'd be mushrooms living in the dark. So, what are your thoughts on him from a libertarian point of view, and what do you know of what he's achieved?
There's really been nothing like it in the history of mankind. History began about 5,000 years ago. Now, we say there's prehistory and there's history. History begins at the moment where people start writing down events, and we can roughly work out what was happening about 3000 BC in Egypt and Mesopotamia. So we call that history. Now, there's never been a leader come along and say, vote for me because I don't believe in the government. Okay. So he's like, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher were basically good leaders, and most libertarians have a reasonably favourable view of them. Okay, but they would say, look, government is good. We're just going to make it quite small. And it worked, The world got a lot richer and happier and more prosperous and more peace when the governments in the West were smaller, unlike the big behemoths they are today. But Javier Milei goes further than a Reagan or a Thatcher would. And they said, well, actually, you can prune it back, but it will always grow back like a weed. So here we are 30 years after the Reagan and the Thatcher successors. And, in the decade after them, the 1990s, a lot of wealth and prosperity, a lot of peace in the world in the 1990s. That's what came of that. But, you've had 9/11, global financial crisis, COVID, global warming on top of all that, crisis. Now the government's bigger and bossier than it was before Thatcher and Reagan. So the radical libertarians are right. Yes, you can cut it back, but you've got to uproot the thing, or it's going to just grow and grow and grow. So what happened in Argentina was, if you went back in the time machine 100 years ago, the living standards in Argentina and Australia were very, very similar. We have very similar climates, roughly similar population. They've got more, and they're very much a European settler society. Okay, so more people think of Argentina as a Spanish country, and Spanish is the official language. But the blood of the Argentinians is slightly more Italian than Spanish. And these are people that came out in these sort of around the same time. A lot of people came here for the gold rush in the late 1800s. Anyway, so it was a very wealthy country in the 1940s. Now, then what they did is they basically elected this president who was, we had Gough Whitlam for 3 years in this country. Imagine having Gough Whitlam for 60 years, okay, where you have a really big government, trade unions very powerful, a lot of government corruption, a lot of mates getting rich off the government, and entrepreneurs and business people leaving the country. And after 60 years of that, poor old Argentina was on its knees. And I was very grateful to be there for Milei's inauguration. And I walked around Buenos Aires for about a week. And, you can tell that this place used to be really, really rich, but it's now in decay. Now, if you walk around Sydney, around the sort of the Martin Place area, you just sort of, everyone, when they're there, they're really busy. They're rushing from one place to another. But if you stand and look at Martin Place and all the buildings down to Circular Quay, there are really beautiful old colonial buildings in Sydney. Okay. And Argentina, they're about twice as big. But unlike the ones in Sydney, which are well kept, the ones in Argentina are sort of rotting at the edges, and it's sad to see. So Milei came into power, and I feel like the average Argentinian just thought, everything's so bad. Let's just have a Hail Mary, and let's just give this guy a go and see what happens. Now, what he did is he basically overnight cut government spending by 30%. just shut down a lot of government regulatory departments and just cut, and let sort of businesses flourish without many rules. And people laughed at him. And this was just over 2 years ago he came to power. Argentina's got the hottest economy in the world. It's foreign investors are wanting to go in. Now, BHP is a country which has been synonymous with Australia's success. Okay, Broken Hill Proprietary Limited. It is now the world's biggest mining company. Still headquarters in Australia. It's still basically an Australian company. Probably its shareholders are 80% people in the US and the UK. I don't know, but probably. But it's still, BHP's been a big deal for Australia. Now, BHP had been weighing up to invest, I think, $7 billion in South Australia or in Argentina. And they made the decision a week ago they're going to put the money into Argentina. Now, I don't like that because I love Australia. Okay, but it just showed, and BHP said, well, look, there's so many rules and regulations in Australia, and we can muck around for 10 years in Australia, and then we might get a mine. Or at the last year, after spending $2 billion developing the mine, someone's going to come along from a bogus indigenous group and say, the blue frog's moth. He says that there's a Dreamline song over this thing. Now that can happen. It does happen. It's not going to happen in Argentina under Malay. So, and look, the good news is, poor old Latin America has been poor for they've just been chaotic, and they have left-wing dictatorships and right-wing dictatorships and military coups, and you look at South America, and it's a very sort of naturally wealthy part of the world. They should be able to get, and the good news is other people are starting to follow what Malay is doing in South America. So it's very, very, very.
El Salvador is fixed up crime.
Absolutely,
and they said 70,000 gang members, and it's gone. And he did it without a bullet being shot. And when they asked him how he did it, he said it was God. We don't know how we did it. It's like miraculous. That's what he said. It's incredible. And it's it's just a strange thing.
He's slashing the government as well. Unless you're a criminal, then you feel the full force. You feel the full force of the state if you're a criminal in El Salvador.
Yeah.
But now people tell me, no one would have ever thought to have gone for a holiday to El Salvador 5 years ago because they had the highest murder capital rate in the world or something. And now, apparently you can walk around, and it's extremely safe.
Well, going back to what you said about Argentina, where the old buildings in Sydney were well maintained, in Argentina they weren't. If you want to see a country that was wealthy and now these beautiful old buildings aren't maintained, go, if you can afford the fuel, go for a drive in regional Victoria, regional anywhere, and you come. They have these, even Broken Hill, you just got these old pubs, these old big buildings. They're just sitting there, up for lease, falling apart, covered in spider webs. We're here now. We need a miracle like Javert, or however you say his name. We need it. And instead, we have a prime minister. I think I saw a video of the other day where he's showing people the rabbits on his tie. Most of Australia is thinking, are we going into a famine? How am I going to keep my house? How am I going to feed my kids? And he's happily walking around with rabbits on his tie. If he was any more disconnected. Anyway, we're here now. The country is hungry for change. And what we're seeing is the one nation. Everyone's talking about it. Everywhere I go, everyone's going, what do you think, Pauline Hanson? What do you think, Pauline Hanson? I go, well, I don't know. I'm good mates with Malcolm Roberts. They go, who's Malcolm Roberts? They don't even know who else is in. It's just Pauline Hanson is seen like he is seen as a savior. This woman for a fish and chip shop, and only because she's tough and speaks her mind, I think. But what are your thoughts on that? On the rise of one nation, who's literally on the verge of destroying the Liberal Party?
Well, look, the truth is I'd much prefer Pauline Hanson to be the Prime Minister than any one of the Liberal Party's put up for a long time. I'd obviously much prefer Pauline Hanson to be the Prime Minister over the Labor Party. Okay, and I am watching what she's doing, and I am enjoying seeing Pauline being the wrecking ball of the Liberal Party, because the Liberal Party needs to be wrecked. And it's, it has been over its history, generally speaking, a good political party. And it's also been a very successful political party. Okay. And the reason why Australia is still generally, we've had a bad, couple of decades, but it's still a pretty fabulous country, Australia.
Mm.
And big part of the credit goes to the Liberal Party basically running the show. And when we say running the show, what were they doing? Well, they were basically, not having much debt like left-wing governments and other governments around the world, and being reasonably pro-business and low taxes. Generally, you get those big macroeconomic things right, the people will sort of make a peaceful, prosperous society from there. If you have to keep the government down, and that's now. But what's happened is really the Liberal, because it's been so successful, it's become a magnet for careerists. Okay, so there's two types of people in politics. Roughly, there's true believers, and there's careerists. Now, probably every politician, everyone who's interested in politics, is some blend of the two. Okay, now ideally, I'm guessing the people that watch Cafe Lockout, they'll be very much towards the true believer point of view. Okay, good. And these are people, and you can be a true believer on the left or the right. There's a lady in the New South Wales Upper House, Emma Hurst from the Animal Justice Party. I tell you what, she's the most sincere person in the House. She really, 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 really believes in a cause. Okay, and
you admired that.
I admire sincerity, and
that.
Yes, exactly. And look, there's a couple of people in the Labor Party, who are, they're not well known. They're sort of on the back bench, but they are real true believers, people in left wing stuff. And again, I admire them, but because it requires a bit of intellect, and they can make the case for it. But every politician is the combination between the true believer and the careerist. Now, what does the careerist get involved with politics for? Well, they get involved with a very successful party like the Liberal Party because they want to get something out of the Liberal Party. They want to get a job or a seat in Parliament, or they want to get a lobbying contract, or they want that successful party to give it something, whereas the true believer gets involved in the party because they thought, I believe in the values of this party and I believe it'll be good if this party runs the government, so I'm going to become an activist in this party. They are the two types of people that get involved. Now, what has happened is, as the membership in general has declined, and it's not just political parties, all around, voluntary organisations in general have declined in the last 30, 40 years. So we end up with quite a small membership in a party like the Liberal Party or the Labor Party, a small membership, and it's dominated by careerists. Now, those careerists will say anything to get ahead. So if the Sydney Morning Herald says, oh, well, we've got to all believe in transgender and climate change and 15,000 vaxxers before the age of 20, if that's what's the cool thing to be said, then that's what they will say. Well, the Liberal Party must believe in this stuff, okay? They're just making it up because they just want to say what you need to say to get ahead. And those people have run the Liberal Party. So that's why they haven't stood for anything. And now the Liberal Party is in this diabolical situation where they've got the Teals, cutting their grass from the left, dragging them to the left. And now they've got the right-wing One Nation people dragging them to the right. And because they don't stand for anything in the first place, they just don't know what to do, and there's no good answer here. And they just don't have. Now, a really great leader would say in politics, they'd say, "Look, I don't change my policies, because of polls. I'll change the polls because I'll advocate for my good policies." That's the way politicians are going to look at it, But most of the politicians just look at the polls and say, "What do I think?" Well, I think what the polls tell me to think. So what I think is going to happen, it's a very, very, very interesting time in Australian political history now, what One Nation, what Pauline Hanson, and good on her for 30 years of perseverance.
Mm.
And
Damn right, man.
I've got an interesting little story, which I don't know if I've said this publicly, but what happened was, as I mentioned before, I was working for Ross Cameron. And Pauline also got elected in 1996 in the big John Howard wave. She got elected as an independent, but it still said Liberal on the ballot. John Howard disendorsed her over some woke stuff. Okay. Anyway, so Hanson gets elected, and she was quite a phenomenon before she got elected on talkback radio in Australia. People were saying, "Oh, John Howard was wrong to disendorse that Liberal." Pauline Hanson, and she was on the Alan Jones show and the John Laws show and the Stan Simonek show. And I'd take it quite an interest in it. I thought she's pretty cool. Now then, the first thing you do in Parliament, you can't really speak in Parliament. You can vote in Parliament, but you can't speak in Parliament until you've given your maiden speech. It's where you sort of introduce yourself to the Parliament and to the wider world. Okay. and Pauline didn't give hers for some time, and I bumped into her twice, just didn't, because there's these long corridors there, and I'm walking past her, and I'd say, Pauline, I'm really looking forward to your maiden speech. I'm certain I said that to her twice. I might have said it to her 4 times, but I definitely said it to her twice. I'm sure she wouldn't remember. Okay. But this is when she was barely known. Now, then about 4 months after that Parliament began, it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm walking back to Ross Cameron's office, and I just happened to walk past the main chamber of the House of Representatives, and the public gallery is chock-a-block. And I thought, that's unusual, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Usually there might be 30 people there, but it's just jam-packed. So I poked my head in there just to have a sticky beak. And Joe Hockey, who just got elected, was giving his maiden speech. Now, Joe Hockey was the North Shore boy, captain of the school, captain of the rugby team, young New South Wales young Liberal president, federal young Liberal president, gets a beautiful North Shore seat at the age of 29. He's absolutely convinced he's on his way to be the Prime Minister. Okay. And so who's he invite? The public gallery is there must have been like 300 people there. All the Joe Hockey fans. Oh, Joe's going to be the Prime Minister one day. And I was in the right-wing faction, so I was opposed to Joe. He was in the left-wing faction. So I wasn't the biggest fan of Joe Hockey. Anyway, but I just thought, I'll listen to him speak. He's going to be significant. He did end up the treasurer. And there's all of his corporate mates, his young Liberal mates, his private school mates, his family, just all these people. Oh, we love you, Joe. But I go into the public gallery where you've got to be really quiet. And it was a bit awkward because I couldn't find a seat. But only after about 30 seconds, Joe Hockey wrapped up his speech. Oh, that's a relief, So all these people then file out to go down to, after they give their maiden speech, when you're a real big noter like Joe Hockey, you go and put on your post-maiden speech drinks. And Joe Hockey, of course, puts on this big lavish affair with champagne and prawns and everything, and all of his mates taking photos. Good on you, Joe, you're going to be the Prime Minister one day. Now, so all of his mates, all of his young Liberal left-wing mates are leaving the public gallery, and I'm leaving the public gallery. But then I hear the speaker say, and I now call the member for Oxley, and I remind the House that this is her maiden speech, and we ask that she be allowed to speak without interruption. And I thought to myself, oh, hang on, member for Oxley. Oh, that's that Pauline Hanson. So I did a U-turn and I went and sat down in the chamber. Now, no one had come to Canberra that day to watch Joe Hockey's maiden speech and Pauline Hanson's maiden speech. So the entire public gallery was empty, except for me.
Oh, my God.
And sadly, and there was only about 8 other members of Parliament there watching her. It had been full when Joe was there, but people, she's just an independent. She'll only be here for one term. And so now, unfortunately, I was so close to her, I was immediately above her. And so I actually couldn't see her. I could hear her, but she was like right underneath. Okay. So anyway, I heard this explosive speech. And Ross Cameron had been one of the MPs in the office, in the Parliament listening. So I went back to my office. I said, man, did you hear that? He said, yeah, I heard that. That was a big deal. And Ross said, let's go around and say hello to her. I said, cool. So we went round to Pauline's office. And she did not know that she had just dropped a nuclear bomb. Okay, she had just, and because she was fairly new to politics, and she's sitting there with one staff member and a little bottle of wine, and she just thought it was another day in the office. And me and Ross came around and said, congratulations, that was a pretty big deal that you just did it. Now then, I hope I haven't bored you with this little story, but the last little thing I said, what happened then is I looked out the window from Pauline's office down to the lawn, the parliamentary lawn downstairs, and what was happening down there? The hockey party. There's all these people getting drunk on the champagne, and we love you, Joe, and everything, right? And I remember thinking, here's Joe out there who all the experts say is going to be the Prime Minister one day. And look, he did end up the Treasurer, okay, and the US Ambassador, so he was on his way. But I remember thinking, gee, this little independent sitting here who doesn't know what she's done right now, she might end up being a bigger deal than that big noter downstairs. And so I've really been sort of cheering her on, from then. Okay,
what was the nuclear bomb? Sorry, but what was that? What was it in the speech that she said that you call the nuclear bomb?
Oh, well, she said, we are being swamped by Asians. She said about 25
Oh,
controversial
okay.
things. That was the biggie.
Yeah,
We are being swamped
that was
by
the big
Asians.
one.
That's the
Yeah.
biggie. And then, look, Australia just sort of went into this hysteria for 2 years about Pauline. And it was a very,
Yeah, I
very
know.
big deal. Okay, now look, so
Yeah.
here she is. You know, she's 70. Now, look, she's in good
Uh-huh.
shape. She's in good shape
Mm.
physically and mentally, you know. And so people say, oh, well, she's going to retire at some point. I don't see it happening soon. Trump's 80 and he's still going.
Mm.
I'm 71 and I'm still going.
Well, and you're looking
You're
fantastic.
amazing,
You're looking
Rosemary.
fantastic. We want, you know, I want to be president of the Rosie for a century fan club. We
Yeah.
need more Rosie Marshall in the world.
Yeah, we do. We do.
So,
Yeah,
so
I
now
just-
look,
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen there's going to be chaos on the right here for 5 to 10 years, and we're probably, you know, Labor governments. I'm sorry to say, everybody. I just think this is going to be a battle now between One Nation and the Liberals and the Nationals. Now, she's got the polling momentum. She's getting good personnel involved. Cory Bernardi, fantastic. Barnaby, fantastic. Other people are signing up, bringing it credibility. Okay, great. But it's got a lot of passion behind it. Now, the Liberal Party is an old institution, still going to have a lot of sort of, you know, momentum that's sort of hard to slow down because it's an old thing. Now, it could easily conk out here. I do believe what can happen at the end of this is that we should have a big, broad tent on the right, probably just call it the Conservative Party, and it should be very, very democratic. The members should be voting for who the parliamentary leader is. Like, there should be 300,000 people voting, not a little party room. This is what they do in Canada. It's to a large extent they do it in the UK now. When they have a vacancy for the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition in Canada, all the major political parties, they have like a month-long process. Sometimes it goes for 5 months. They have TV debates. There might be 5 people getting up there and saying, you know, vote for me if you're a member of the Conservative Party because I want to be the leader, because I want to, you know, do blah, blah, blah. And people say, no, vote for me. And I just think that's how we can really turn the country around. I think the Liberal Party is still like a 19th century organisation about how it elects its leaders and its candidates. So that's you know, I'm enjoying the drama.
You know, John,
Well, that's
my soft spot for Pauline Hanson comes from when we were on the in front of Parliament House, and there were hundreds of thousands of Australians there marching on Canberra, saying mandates were wrong, and no one should lose a job. She was the only politician I saw come out of that building in all those days. I saw her personally. You know, every other politician hid away in that building with hundreds of thousands of Aussie constituents standing just a few feet away. But she was out there, so I cut her some slack for that.
Look, I think
that was
Pauline has got very good instincts. She doesn't, you know, she's never said that she's Albert Einstein, the intellectual, but she's a bit like Trump, actually. She's just sort of, you know, has a good sense about what's right and what's wrong. And
I think that's what people pick up. And there's lots of Indians and Asians that love her. So all the people they say, oh, she's racist, the ones that she's racist against actually want her in because they know what their country's like. It's 2 hours now, so I'll move to round this up. And I'm going to let other people finish. But, you know, I wanted to hark you back when I was growing up and there was the threat of nuclear war. And they were always frightening with us with that. And Sting came out with a song that said, I hope the Russians love their children too.
Yes.
And in this vaccine debate that we have, there was a question here, or a statement here from Jason Cornick. It said, "G'day, Jason. Tonight on the news, 1 in 3 children have allergies now." And he says, when we went to school, no one had allergies, but now they have allergies. You've got children now, you're told, don't take peanut butter to school, you could kill a kid. Like, what? So we have all these children who are sick. We have myocarditis, pericarditis. We have all these issues. Rosemary isn't a total ambassador of that, the Vax bus. We have real issues, and we have people pushing it. No, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. But you've got to say at some point, and this with all the ideological things that we're facing, that surely the way through now is value. What do we value as a nation the most? And surely, if we're not valuing the health of our children, then surely we're going to be floundering through everything that's coming if we don't have a core value. And surely the value should be, because right at the moment we're leaving. I asked Rennick this in a question that went just uber viral. People were sending it to me, going, "Have you seen this?" I go, "Yeah, I did it." And I asked him, "Is there any way we can pay off the $1 trillion debt in our lifetime so we're not leaving it to our children?" That was the question. And I'll let you find the answer for this. But the thing is, this is it. Surely, as a country now, with all this bullshit going around from everything, climate change, everything like this, we're broke. We're getting broker. The people are sad. They're not happy. They walk around. They don't joke. They there's the kids can't afford houses. There's all this other shit's going on. It's just shitstorm, and everyone knows it. And everyone's blaming Trump for the war. Oh, it's Trump. But we're the ones who gave the gas away for free. John Howard gave the gas away for free. He's not been held to account. We've got all this mineral wealth that we could basically underwrite the debt with. All these issues. And I wonder if it's a core issue that could get us all in the one path heading to somewhere. And I interviewed a guy the other day. He's been running for politician for a while, Kevin Lowry, and he said something to me, and I said, "That's a vision for the country." And he said, "We have the ability to give land away so cheap that young Australians could afford it, and we have the ability, if we wanted to allow them to build a house for say $300,000." And in my head, I saw a young Australian couple, and it doesn't matter what color, race, or creed you are. I saw them walking into this house on this 800 square meter property, and they thought, "You know what this is missing in this house? It's not a big widescreen TV. It's not a upside down fridge. It's not a games room. It's children.
Absolutely.
It's the future of our country, and that we value them." And I have all this bullshit going on, and I just wish our generation of whatever age would start focusing on what is the reason we're here. Because I know when my son was born and he was in my arms, I never thought I'd be a good parent, and I wasn't. But I still, when he was placed in my arms, I was given a great lesson by the universe. It said, "Michael, you are one page in an extraordinary long novel. And most of those novels are lost. No one knows who they were, who your forefathers were. They're gone. You know your father, maybe your grandfather, and then it's a mystery.
That's right.
But you are not the last page. The new page is your son or your daughter, and they're going to write a new page, and you're just this crazy, fucked up little page. But this page is this. And I feel as human beings, it'd be great if we could have conversations and not about this or this or this or this, but actually why we're here. What is the purpose of being alive? And what is our core duty, not only to ourselves, but to the next generation, which is we leave them this incredible country that has no debt and is managing its mineral wealth so well that if this orange man decides to go to war, we just look at it with popcorn and go, "Wow, you're crazy," but our fuel's still 30 cents a litre, and we care for us. Do you think that's possible going forward, that the Australian public could actually start going, our children are sick, we got to find out why, and we've got to motivate them, we've got to give them, because all they do, we have children I meet now who haven't left home because they don't see any point. They don't want to have kids. They don't want to even go to uni. They just see no point. And that's us doing that. Or they're fucked up because they don't know what gender they are. That's us doing that. And I feel that, I don't know, do you think there's any possible way that Australians or the mass of Australians could actually come back from the fog of bullshit that they're stuck in and focus on what is good for the next generation, because I'm saying this in all the speeches everywhere. The quality, John, of your great-grandson's liberty will depend on the decisions we make today, whether he knows it or not. He will either be enslaved or he'll be liberated, and we are the ones that will decide that.
Is that a question
Stick
to
a
me or
question
Rosie?
mark on the end of that and go. Yeah, I'll go with you because you're the big politician. Then we'll get to the others. But what do you think now we've got you here?
Well,
Do you
on the
think
question of can we build a consensus in this country, a majority in this country that wants to have a scrutiny of the vaccine industry? Well, we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know, can we do our best in raising awareness to bring it about? Okay, so we should say, well, look, we're going to just keep fighting it, and it may not be another 3 generations until we have that breakthrough. But I believe the world will be here in the year 3026. I believe we'll still be here in 1,000 years. I think somehow we'll prevent the nuclear bombs going off, and we will not be, injecting little kids with as many vaccines, like trying to maximize commercial profits through vaccines. So at some point, it's going to give up. Now, at some time, I believe that a reckoning will come, and I believe that it's inevitable. It's only a question of when do we get to that point, and we just have to give it our very best, and then hopefully it happens in our lifetime, but it might be like I really liked your analogy there, Michael, about your life is just one page in a very long novel, and most pages are forgotten. So all we've got to do is make our one little page the best possible page we can.
How about you, Rosemary? Do you think it's possible that we could see great change?
I'm in a
you're
hurry.
an ambassador for it.
I'm
Yeah, I
in a big
know.
hurry.
I feel your urgency.
Well, I do think that we need to be mindful of the fact that we're rendering so many children needing parental care full time. NDIS is being diminished. It does beg the question, is there some horrible plan to make our children ill? So we all accept the government's overreach and we just all keel over and get a CBDC. I've had that thought that they're not stopping vaccines, they're pushing it harder and harder. I'm just hoping that enough people are waking up. And my experience at the Forest of the Ford is that very few people now give me a hard time, and younger people are questioning it much more, thank God. So I'm hopeful that we're going to get it done within a couple of years. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for that.
Dr. Oosterhuis, what are your thoughts, brother?
I actually think things are going to move much quicker. I don't think we're going to have to wait for our children's children. I think Ayn Rand said you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And I think we're facing the consequences now. And these consequences, whether it's net zero, without energy, we don't have an economy. And so net zero means zero economy. It means, and we've realized that we can't run our lorries and our mines on windmills and prayers and solar panels. So we've suddenly discovered. So basically, we've had a series of nested really bad ideas. And I don't think these bad, and whether it's woke, whether it's net zero, whether it's mandating vaccines on people, whether it's calling them vaccines when they're actually gene therapies, whether it's the monetary system, we've got a series of nested bad ideas, and we're at the time of consequences, and those consequences are coming fast. So I don't think we're going to have to wait very long. Honestly, I think that the truth of all these things is upon us. It's upon us, and I rejoice because although the transition is going to be hard, orientating ourselves towards logic, common sense, truth, freedom is absolutely necessary, because in an environment of censorship, you don't have democracy. If we can't speak freely, we're not living in a democracy. When we get censored and subjected to lawfare for raising safety issues, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, I'm a pro-safety doctor. this anti-vax thing is a label, but I've never been anything other than pro-safety. I'm saying, hey, there's safety issues, and to be attacked for that, I think we've become so unmoored from reality. But it's the fuel, it's the energy that is going to wake the country up. The inflation that comes from that, the economic consequences of it. We will learn the bullshit of windmills and solar panels running our economy very, very soon. So I don't think we have long to wait. They're my
Good.
thoughts.
Let's hope so.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Rosie, for coming on. And
My
John,
pleasure.
I'd like to thank you for coming on. It's been an honor to have you on. It's the second time we met. I met you in the office. It was great then, but it's really great. And the
Michael.
thing is, what I love about you coming on, this is live, man, which is why we had an issue first on. That's a dangerous place for a politician to be. You know what I mean? You're not being fed. We haven't fed you any questions. You had no idea
Yeah.
what we're talking about. I admire that as a courage as a politician.
We
Means you're
don't-
coming from a source of truth.
We don't believe in guardrails at the laissez-faire Libertarian Party. Can I put in?
Yeah, I think
I've got a
yeah.
I've got a podcast, Michael. I'd just like to put in a quick plug for. It's
Yeah,
called
sure, go.
the Political History of Australia. I'm up to episode 22. It's probably going to end up being about 200 episodes. We're starting from the beginning before Captain Cook, and we're going through. And it's about the real history of Australia. It's about John MacArthur and all these really interesting things that happened. And it's going to come up to the present day. So ScoMo's going to be thrilled when we get up to the COVID era because we're going to get some retribution on him at that point. But
great.
Political History of Australia, you can see it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify.
And you're a great raconteur. I look forward to watching that.
Oh, you've
Yeah,
oh, thank you,
congratulations, man. It's look, it's a history. I actually think it's needed because we need to know who we are and where we came from. Otherwise, we can't fight for anything. So I think it's
You
absolutely
listen to
great.
this, this history podcast is going to make Australians love Australia again.
Great.
Yeah, I interviewed two journalists the other day. They're both in their 70s now. One's in their 80s. One worked for the Daily Mail. One worked for the Sydney Morning Herald and the Australian, major reporters. It was fascinating to get them together talking about Gough Whitlam. They'd interviewed him, both interviewed him, and other greats like that, Malcolm Fraser and all this. It was a different time. It seemed to be a more robust time. But there seemed to be at its heart, maybe I'm naive, but there seemed to be a great patriotism for the actual country itself. And it's strange where we are now. Anyway, thank you for coming on, John. Please stay in touch. It's great to have
Thank
you
you.
on.
Nice to see you,
What you do
Nice
is you
to
start
see you.
conversations, and that's what we need. So anyway, we're going out with the same song we started with, Be Free. This was my lyrics, but AI. And here we are. And I all hope you have a great Easter. And let's see where we go in this crazy time that we're living in. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Historically, we are the debris, forgotten faces, never more to be. Instead of legends fighting for something that had no guarantees, living ghosts we chose to live and die as their worker bees. Why didn't we break out from their hide? Why didn't we follow our own sun to another life? Why didn't we scroll over all their flowers? Brothers and sisters, it's okay to be free. Brothers and sisters,